All right, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us in conversation today with Elspeth Schulze and Leigh Suggs, on view currently at Abigail Ogilvy Gallery in Los Angeles as part of their two-person exhibition, Many Small Cuts. My name is Kaylee Hennessey. I'm the director of the space, and I'm really excited to be joined in conversation today with these two artists as we get to discuss a little bit more about your process and what went into making this show. First, I'll do a little bit of a brief introduction. So, Elspeth, you are based in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
That's right.
And we'll get a bit more into the nature of this body of work. But you hold an MFA in ceramics from the University of Colorado Boulder, a degree in fashion design from the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York, and a BA in literature and visual art from Loyola in New Orleans. I'd also like to note that Elspeth is currently an alumni in residence at the Tulsa Artist Fellowship and an upcoming artist in residence at Bemis Center for Contemporary Art in Omaha, Nebraska.
Congratulations! Yeah, this summer. Excited.
And Leigh are originally from Boone, North Carolina, but are currently based in Richmond, Virginia. Leigh received her BFA from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill in 2003 and her MFA from the Virginia Commonwealth University in 2015. Both of these artists have placed works in both private and numerous corporate collections, museum collections, and have shown widely in the US. So I think a great place to begin would be with this exhibition title, Many Small Cuts. In addition to being a nod to the process of making your work, there's also a little bit of a conceptual layer to it. Would you each mind talking a little bit about how that title kind of plays into your work?
Sure. I think when we were first in conversation about the show, so Leigh and I haven't met before today in person, which is wild because we've been in conversation over the past year, kind of preparing for this. And the art world is small, and so we have many mutual friends. And at some point, I feel like it was mentioned the idea of us bringing our work together in the space, which it's like.
I would like to be able to find where that was. I don't even remember, but
I know.
yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, we should find the source. So it's been like brewing for a while. But in thinking about, having our work in the same space, kind of early on, this phrase, many small cuts, kind of popped into our heads. I think the idea of like these small movements that add up to a larger whole, whether it's like a day in the studio when maybe you'd rather be somewhere else. But the accumulation of marks, of movements, of efforts that kind of like gradually add up to something bigger.
Yeah, I think there's that phrase to death by 1,000 cuts, but neither of us wanted that negative or negative-ish connotation of that phrase, but the idea of process being small steps to get somewhere, like what you're saying, or this like build up to something greater can also be very positive. So I think that is obviously more of the direction of where the conceptual idea came from for me. But yeah, obviously for me it's literal because all of my work is hand cut. So everything is touched many, 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 many times. Each square there's at least 4 times that I'm moving the knife around. So there's a slow, loving, tender quality with my work too that doesn't necessarily come across outwardly. But yes, I'm like all over my work all the time. So it's very well loved, and I'd rather that be the more positive connotation of many small cuts.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's a sharpness too, both to the work. It's like the act of cutting with the blade and the material, and like there's such a crispness to your work. Totally, and it's interesting that we're both working in that kind of reductive way, where we're starting with something and then like cutting it down to size. Like I start with a sheet of plywood, and I cut that into forms, and then and cut kind of footprints for other shapes to be inlaid. So that kind of relationship of making a form through cutting was kind of like a base layer for both of us, maybe at a certain point.
Yeah, the removal and the addition for both of us takes a lot of guts.
Yeah.
But also is a very important thing of this reduction and addition to find the balance.
Yes, the taking away and the adding back, and that kind of like push and pull between those parts of the process.
Yeah.
And speaking of process, we've both just gotten into it a little bit. I'm curious if you could take us through like the beginning to end of creating a piece. Like, what does your entire process look like for someone who might not know?
That's such a good question, because I feel like we both are like so invested in process, and also I feel like you looking at either of our work, you may not have any idea the steps taken to get there, because it is like very clean and so intentional. Do you want to talk through your?
Conceptually, it starts with, I usually get most of my inspiration through like visual phenomena, whether it's like rubbing your eyes a little too hard and there's like bursts or flashes of light, or not that you're supposed to stare at the sun, but or a bright light that it then rides with you for a little while, and how it gets burned in your retina and everything you're looking at has that sort of flash. So that is the early idea, and sometimes I have a lot of those visions early in the morning. I guess maybe when your eyes are sensitive. So at least if I were to think of the perfect day, I have the idea in the morning, which doesn't always happen this perfectly, but that's sort of that special time for me where you're half awake, half asleep, kind of rising for the day. It's a lot of where my inspiration comes from. And it's usually a visual flash or something quick. From that, try to figure out a way to make it a static image, which is very hard. Like, how do you transfer something that's so personal and I only saw it to present it as a final piece or a visual for someone else to experience? But my actual process then is, I mainly work with paper, UPO paper, which is a plastic paper, but also I work a lot with handmade paper. So I'm sort of sometimes working on a collage while I'm working on a cutout. But each of the cutouts is a process of drawing with architectural tools, so everything's sort of mapped out, but on the back of the work. So I tend to spend most of my time behind the work or on the back of the work. And I don't see the finished thing until it's done. Like, I don't flip it back and forth, I'm only working on the back. So what happens on the front then can also become this like quick visual first moment of seeing something too.
So you're using like compasses and rulers, kind of drafting the piece in reverse.
Yes. Yep.
So do you paint both sides first?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes I paint after. So it's sort of, if I don't like a color, I'll repaint it after.
Yeah.
But most of the time I'm painting before, so that helps with the precision. So when you paint after, there's some, like, it'll seep to the back, or like it affects how the glow from the front is perceived sometimes. Anyway, that's real technical. But sorry, I just walked through a really long.
Oh no, that's what we
wanted.
That's really impressive.
Yeah. So like when something is finished, that's usually the first time when I flip it back over. But everything is mapped out with a drawing, and then I use tape as a way to see my drawing sometimes too, and to how I get the perfect like warps and wefts of these grids that I work with too. So that's sort of.
When you're cutting the kind of squares away, are you using a ruler, or are you just freehand?
Freehand. Yeah. So the tape also acts as like a little, just enough thickness for. I mean, obviously, whatever, I probably spent more than 10,000 hours, but that practice time of knowing how to use a knife and how that feels. So having the tape is enough depth for me to have an edge to sort of walk up to.
Nice.
And you're just using an X-Acto blade?
Just an X-Acto blade, for all the cutting.
How often do you have to switch blades?
Probably should switch it out more often than I do. Several.
per piece. kind
Oh,
of.
yeah. Yes, I have jars of them.
Wow.
I don't know, like, what do you do with them? Make artwork? I don't know, I haven't gotten there yet, but melt them down into something
That would be cool.
Yeah.
I love that you keep them.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, I keep all the drops too from the work. So I have baggies of all the little squares that then become another body of work too. So yes, that's a longer version of the additive and reductive
Totally.
process too. I save these things and they become something else later. So.
Love that.
How about you, Elspeth? Take us through your process.
So it's interesting. It's like I feel like there are a lot of similarities and also big differences.
Yeah.
Whenever you talk about like an architectural approach, using architectural tools to draw, I'm doing the same thing, but in a computer program. So I start with drawing by hand. So I tend to have like geometric framework, like an arch for the outside of a piece, and then kind of organic plant-based motifs in the inside. And so I'm drawing those organic forms by hand. I usually do that with like pencil and ink because it allows like a looseness that I really like to start my process with. And once I have,
Are those drawings still precious to you, or are they?
they're not. They're kind of like boxes of them. I don't like
But you
date them.
save them.
I save
Okay,
them. Yes,
cool.
I save them, but I also like don't feel precious about them. And I'm always like, we should probably write a date on the back so I could like track, when I'm like, first thinking through this. But it's such a way of thinking through drawing that I have like, I'll make like 12 of the same motif. If I'm thinking about like kind of a palmetto frond or a leaf form, I'll like just over and over draw the same thing and over and over. And so it's really, I just have like a lot of them, so they don't feel precious,
Yeah.
So that's by hand, and then once I have forms that I like, I then translate those into a digital space. So I take a picture of that and put it in the computer, and I like literally trace with the mouse, so it becomes like a vector, like a digital line that the computer can read. And so then I'm working in a program called Rhino, which is a CAD program that architects use, and I use it in a super simple way. Like you can use it in 3 dimensions, and I'm using it as like a 2-dimensional drawing tool. So I can play around. Let's say like I know that I want to make a circular piece. I can have my like outside circle. I can scale it definitely, and I can place my plant forms inside and rotate them and move them around. So it's a way to draw in that digital space. And once I have those, I go to a makerspace, a digital fabrication lab. There's this really incredible one in Tulsa, which makes it possible for me to make my work. And I use a range of tools there. The same like digital lines that I'm drawing can then speak to different machines. So I take like a sheet of plywood, and I use a CNC milling machine, which your husband uses all the time. And that basically has like a drill bit that's spinning like a router, but it's following the path of the lines that are drawn in the computer. So I have to tell it what to do, which is a process. And so then I'll have like my outside form of plywood, and I cut that in layers. I'll have like a thin, really nice face that's maybe like 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch, and I'll have like a couple other layers that form like the framing in the back, the structure for that. And so I glue those all together. I go into the wood shop, and that's like kind of traditional wood shop processes, like gluing things up, clamping them, nailing them together, lots and lots of sanding and cleanup. And then I paint that surface, that wood surface. And then I tend to want to bring other materials into those pieces, so I have processes of inlay. So whenever I'm CNCing an outside form, I'll also be able to engrave these kind of footprints on the face of the piece, and then I can decide what to do with those recesses. I can either like put plaster in them, flood it with like a plaster that will harden, or I can add other materials like a brass or a ceramic into that space. And I use other digital fabrication tools to cut those materials as well. So there's a water jet cutter that I just learned to use in the last year that I've been like really obsessed with, I've been cutting like thin sheets of brass and doing brass inlay and like thicker ceramic tile. So kind of having the wood structure and then these other materials that are inset. It's just kind of a back and forth between like time in my studio, time at this digital fabrication lab, time at the wood shop.
I've rejected those types of tools for so long, but I think I also, the possibilities that opens up as far as time. Because my pieces take so long, but
Totally.
over the years I have realized that time is embedded in the work, and that's really important to me. It really is part of the work, but the idea of all these tools that could open up all these possibilities.
Yeah. I know, I'd be excited to see what you're doing. Now we're collaborating with Daniel.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Yeah.
Your husband. I think I love using these tools, but I think you have to. I get super excited about the tools and programs because I can think between tools. I have this one line that can then be like cut out of any. It's a cutting process, but it can be cut out of any material.
Yeah.
Like,
I can't use an exact to cut through.
Right, and there's this I just get super excited about the potential, and I really like bringing different materials together, and so those digital fabrication tools allow me to do that in a way that I find really exciting. But it's definitely a different way of spending time. Like I am on the computer a lot, I'm on the computer a lot. I'm in these noisy, the CNC milling space is super noisy. You're in headphones, you have on protective eyeglasses. It's not a meditative, pleasant space to be. And so a lot of my time is not in, I think that's why I start with an ink drawing, because that is so pleasurable, quiet time in my studio. So it's not, I get super excited about what it can do, but it can be a slog sometimes. And it's amazing, what a tool can, to watch, this tool cutting through something really hard that would be impossible to cut through by hand. But it also, it goes wrong, too. There's human error, these machines are amazing, but there's, always human error. Sometimes you, just lose entire days because something goes wrong.
Yeah.
So there's, this, you have to accept the process is, so controlled and also out of your control sometimes.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's really interesting for me to hear about the process, including these architectural tools and models, like the CAD programs or the way that you're drafting using these tools. Because I know that when we had discussed the concept behind the show, there were a lot of ways that architecture was working its way into the pieces themselves that weren't just the physicality of it. Can you talk a little bit more about how architecture comes through in this work?
I worked at an architecture firm after undergrad for a number of years, so I think that
That's so interesting.
Yeah. I that is not at all my degree or anything I actually studied, but I understand architectural drawings naturally, which is, I don't know, so I think that has somehow become a sub-layer in my life, obviously, but I am very drawn to doors, windows, any sort of passageway or pass-through. I'm aware of that space, the negative space and the positive space. I think about that a lot, just in general, oh, look at those cool windows over there. Those are things I notice in environments. But I also am really interested in how your body is in this space. So architecture of your own physicality, and then how that is also in space. The feeling you get in a room, or the feeling you get as you pass through a doorway. There is some physical something that happens, at least to me, but I think if people were paying attention, they might notice that to themselves. But I think also part to this latter part of my life, my father passed away about 3 years ago, and things I really remember from that time, and also through my grief and dreams and things like that, I was looking for him opening doors, opening windows, and I would always find him just on the other side of something, and it was usually a door or a window. And he was always fine over there, and would laugh at me, why are you so worried? I'm fine, I'm here, I'm not lost. And so there's also that aspect of wondering what's on the other side of something. So I think in my work too, that's why the backs get painted, and so there's an awareness of this other side of the paper. You don't know where that color is coming from, or you might not see it at first, but if you spend a little bit more time, you're aware of the back of the work. That's also where I'm spending most of my time too. So I don't know, I'm interested in that. Doors and windows as this portal, which, I mean, it's not really that, but conceptually, the thought of over here, and existing in both at the same time.
Over here, there's a great title also.
I think that's a really interesting thing for your audience as well. I mean, from the people who have been coming in and seeing your works, there's obviously a very overarching architectural form to them. But then within the piece itself, you have hundreds of windows.
Yeah.
And with a material like paper that's so two-dimensional, so flat, you're getting someone to engage with what they think is behind. Which isn't very often how an audience engages with a material like paper.
Right. I think people look at paper as oh, that's the thing I write on, or tear that up, it's junk mail, throw it away. But I don't know, there's so much richness in paper, and it has so many sides if you actually stop to think about it. So when you cut these little windows or these holes through paper, there's then all these edges, and then there's the other side. So it becomes more of like a sculptural object, even though it's flat.
And you're treating it sculpturally too.
Yeah. How about architecture for you?
It's so, I mean, I feel like
We're learning so much more.
I was gonna say, like, and we talked so many times, it's interesting to have these things like kind of emerge. But so my grandparents were both architects. My mother's mother and father, they met as like architectural engineering students in college, and they were in Louisiana. They were really interested in sustainable design and kind of experimental architecture. They actually like followed Buckminster Fuller around the country. When he was like lecturing, it was like the right era, you know. So I grew up really close to them and close to their space. They have this like really beautiful spare home that they built between two bodies of water, the Vermilion River, and a cypress and tupelo swamp. It was like narrow, it was a lot of land. They really wanted their space to be like integrated into the natural landscape. And inside were like bare plaster walls, and they had these round windows on the front, which I find myself like making these round pieces as like these portal experiences. At the same time, my sisters and I went to a Catholic school. My family was not religious, but the region is like very, very culturally Catholic. And I loved going to Mass every week because it was, again, like this really spare chapel with plaster walls and these arched windows where the light would be shining through. And Louisiana is such a lush landscape that I always felt like the plants were like pressing in from the outside. You would look out the windows and there would be like palmetto fronds or banana leaves. And I see that again and again in my work. I think of the forms like windows, like portals, and these kind of organic forms framed within that framework.
And you have a really beautiful engagement with the architecture of our gallery too for this exhibition. It's a little bit out of view of, we've got this gorgeous diptych above the door that I just wanted to know.
Yeah, we really wanted to think about, we realized that our work was engaging with architecture. I think because like our work is like in a similar scale and we're thinking about windows, they're kind of like hung at window height, which makes sense. And it's like in relation to your body, you can imagine going through. So I think it totally works. And you know, I love that these two pieces are hung on top of each other, so you're starting to like think vertically. But I do love, maybe next time we'll go really crazy.